What's up, everybody? I think we are recording. So we're going to be doing something a little bit different today. I'm going to be recording on Zoom just to kind of pull up some documents and show some pictures and stuff. My computer's a little wobbly because I got it placed right in my bed because this is like the little comfy spot. I don't really have like a set up office or anything. But today we're going to be discussing the very mysterious case of Suzanne Lyle, who disappeared from SUNY Albany campus back in 1998. Some of you guys may have heard of this story. Some of you guys probably haven't. And the reason we're doing it, it's a little unrelated to what we normally do, but I'm going to kind of focus it on, or at least try to focus it a little bit on Suzanne Lyall's poetry. And we're going to read a particular poem that I found on this website called darklight.com. It's a website ran by her ex-boyfriend slash fiance by the name of Richard Condon. No, it's not the not famous novelist Richard Condon. It's a different guy altogether. A little bit of a strange character. We'll get into that shortly here. But I thought it would just be kind of interesting to, I need to get this story kind of off my chest because I've just been kind of really interested in it and really just kind of doing a deep dive on it recently. Most of you guys know that I am from upstate New York. I was only like 8 or 9 years old when this missing persons case kind of came to the forefront, came up to the news. Suzanne Lyle was a couple generations ahead of me, maybe one or two. But she seemed like a really interesting person. She definitely seemed like my type of person. She was a poet. She was an introvert. She was a big fan of Rush. I'm actually a huge lover of the band Rush myself. She just kind of liked to be at home with her family and with her boyfriend. And that's basically how I am, you know. So I'd like to think maybe I have something in common with this woman who I never met, but who knows, maybe we would have crossed paths or something at some point. Very interesting story. I am going to pull up my notes here. I'm going to share the screen and pull up my notes. Let me just make sure I can kind of get to them here. Make sure I got everything in order, just to make sure everything is where it's supposed to be. I don't have a lot of pictures, but I do kind of want to pop up a few pictures on the screen as we discuss this. And so, okay, so I did take all my own notes. This is not copied and pasted. So we're just going to kind of look at, I'm going to kind of pull the notes up on the screen just so I can kind of refer to them, but we'll kind of ad lib in between them. So it's not going to be a super produced video or anything, but I hope you guys will enjoy this. And the reason I'm making this video is because I've been watching Dave Paulides for a while, he's an author, used to be an undercover, detective. He was a former police officer. And he talks a lot about missing people in the context of state parks, sort of the more supernatural, missing persons cases that we often hear about or often don't hear about. Now, the Suzanne Lyle case, I think, just hits home with me because it happened in Albany. I'm from Syracuse. I've been to Albany a couple of times. It's not super close to my hometown or anything like that, but it's from upstate New York, so it kind of just resonates with me. And Suzanne Lyle just seems like a really interesting person, and it's just another tragic tale of a missing person in America. We've got way too many missing people in this country and all throughout the world. And I'm kind of encouraging, you know, I'm making this video to encourage people to really think about missing people and try to research missing people. So maybe you can make a difference. Maybe you'll recognize somebody. You can learn a lot about, society and law enforcement and how to stay safe. And just learn a lot of interesting facts just by researching missing people. And also it kind of humbles you when you really start to think of how lucky you are that nothing tragic like this has happened to you or any of your loved ones. But, especially if you have a daughter or a young child, or even an elderly family member, people can either get lost or abducted or, who knows what could happen in this world. So it's very tragic, but I'm making this video because I am sort of interested in weird, creepy, scary things. But I wouldn't say that I'm interested in this case or any other case to really get, I'm not really interested in the crimes themselves. I do not want to give any attention to, the serial killers or the potential perpetrators. We will discuss them just briefly because they're relevant to this case and many others. Perpetrators, they're relevant to missing persons cases or murder cases or legal cases. But my interest does not lie with sort of, you know, heroizing or sort of putting, terribly evil people on a sort of interesting pedestal. I know some people do. Um, I used to read a lot of true crime books back when I was younger and stuff, but I do kind of want to keep the focus on Susie Lyle and sort of keep the focus on her poetry. But also, we're just going to kind of discuss my thoughts on all the information I've gathered on the Susie Lyle case. And maybe towards the end, we can kind of reflect on why I've made this video as well. Going to be vaping and having a little bit of a drink here. I hope that's all right with you guys. Kind of in the process of rearranging the background here. So let's just share a screen here and let's see what we can accomplish here. I'm sharing the screen and I can't really see how it looks, while it's taking place. So should we start with, let's just kind of give you guys a rundown of the weird, mysterious case of Susie Lyle. For those of you that are not familiar with it. Now, I'm not sure if you guys are going to really, I think you guys will be able to see what's on the screen here. So this is all my own writing. I just kind of took notes and we're just going to kind of go through it and kind of, explain further details in the middle. So let's just kind of get started here and we'll talk more about the poetry. Suzanne, you guys can go to the website darklight.com or just go to Google and type in Suzanne Lyle poetry. She was an amazing poet. And that's another reason we're making this video, because I've been talking a lot about literature and books and poetry. So I think this video kind of oddly fits in. And that's another reason that I just sort of latched onto this case. I originally heard about the case from a channel called Top Fives, but I will leave a link I will leave a bunch of links in the description of really well produced videos, way better than I'll be able to make about Suzanne Lyall's case. But I do want to just sort of discuss my own thoughts and opinions on this. So let's get started here. I'll see if I can pull up a picture of her as well. That would be helpful for you guys to get her in your minds. I'm not sure if I can really do everything here. So you guys should see this beautiful picture of Suzanne Lyle here. I'm not sure if I expand this document, if it's going to cover it up or anything. Let me just shrink the font here so that I can read this in real time here. Let's see, where did it go? All right, so I'm just going to make my font a little bit smaller so that maybe we can get it in here. Not sure if that helped a little bit. Anyway, so let's get started here. Okay, Suzanne Lyle was born in April of 1978 in Saratoga Springs, New York, to Doug and Mary Lyle. Later, the family moved to Ballston Spa, where Susie was raised. Poetry, Rush, and computers were Suzanne's, life's passions. She started writing poetry at a pretty young age. I assume Susie Lyle read quite a bit as well. And there's a really cute story from her mother that said that Susie Lyle would sometimes get this wave of inspiration. Maybe she was taking a shower or making breakfast or something, and she would get out of the shower with soap in her hair. And her mother would be like, "Hey, Susie, what are you doing?" And she'd say, "Well, I got this inspiration for this really great poem and I had to write it down." She sounds like such an interesting person. She was also a very introverted young person. She was definitely not an extrovert. She was kind of like I am, definitely a homebody type of person, likes to stay home with her friends and family, reading books, writing poetry, and working on computers. And she actually started to build and sort of tear apart and repair computers. And this was back in, the late 80s and 90s, where computers were kind of just becoming a thing. So I thought that was really interesting as well. Very loyal to her friends and family. In high school, Susie began chatting on message boards and forums. She was big in like the underground Rush community, the Canadian band Rush, where she joined a computer club run by a man named Richard Condon, who would later become her boyfriend slash fiance. Apparently nobody knew they were engaged, which is a little strange, but he claims they were. shortly after the pair started dating. So it's been reported that they had somewhat of a rocky relationship. And, with all young lovers, I remember my first relationship was rather rocky, but nothing too crazy, nothing too out of the ordinary until we kind of get more into the story here. So she joined this computer club, sort of orchestrated by Richard Condon. Her parents were a little weary, so her father went to the first meeting just to kind of make sure everything was okay. And Richard Condon really took to Suzanne, and Susie did not really warm up to Richard. It's been alleged up until maybe 3 or 4 months after. But anyway, they started dating. Um, had some issues here and there that we'll get into. So Richard was a computer whiz as well, and that was why he sort of hit it off with Susie. And they started working on computers. And allegedly, at some point during this time or after, Richard either convinced her or suggested that he should be able to access her computer and her software and all of her information at home from his computer. Now, it is unknown whether Susie had this privilege on his computer. I'm assuming they did. I've heard different conflicting stories. So we'll just kind of follow suit here. So as time went on, it seemed like Susie and Richard's relationship was doing okay, but there were some times, as her mother said, where Susie would maybe start to feel suffocated or something. We don't really know what Susie's motivations were to end the relationship. But she did try to break up with Richard Condon several times, and either through a letter or over the phone or email, who knows what happened. But Richard would call hysterically and, just convince Susie to stay in the relationship, and that's not very uncommon, I would say. Maybe, she was just young and he was young, and she was trying to kind of give him the benefit of the doubt. She was trying to give him another chance. So I wouldn't say that he was forcing her to stay with him, but there does seem to be kind of a strange pattern of her attempting to break up with Richard Condon and then not following suit for one reason or another. So I told you guys a little bit about the computer situation between the two of them. So we're going to fast forward to Susie graduates high school like we all do. So Susie Lyle went to college at Oneonta for 1 year, but later transferred to SUNY Albany to continue her studies in computer science, as the program was better and a bit more challenging. Apparently, SUNY Oneonta, I don't know if Oneonta is actually SUNY school. Albany is a SUNY school, but anyway, long story short, Oneonta was not challenging her enough, and she was not really close to anybody that she knew or that she could relate to. She was kind of a homebody, as she always was, but probably more so at Oneonta. So she decided to transfer to the SUNY campus of Albany to continue her studies in computer science. So in addition to this, Susie was working real hard. She took on 2 part-time jobs, one in Troy, New York, which was sort of located somewhere near Richard's house. But then I've heard that her other job closer to the Albany campus was actually closer to Richard's job as well. So I'm not really sure. There's a little confusion there. But anyway, she was working hard like most of us try to do in college, going to lots of classes, doing lots of studying. And one of her jobs was at the Crossgates Mall in Albany, New York. I've never been there. If we have anybody that has attended that mall, please let us know. I did do some research on the mall, and they have like shootings and robberies every other weekend. So maybe there was some type of upsurge of crime, even dating back to 1998, that we could try to discuss, or at least, keep in your peripheral, because that is the date of Susie Lyle's disappearance. So anyway, she got a job at Crossgates Mall at this place called Babbage's, which was like a computer software Radio Shack, maybe GameStop type of place. They sold video game supplies, computers, all that good stuff. So she appeared to be enjoying her life as well as her relationship with Richard. No real, red flags or anything. But her mother was not a real big fan of this guy for a lot of different reasons. There doesn't appear to be any evidence of physical abuse or emotional abuse or anything. Well, maybe there was some emotional abuse, like we've kind of been talking about, with sort of pressuring her to stay in the relationship and stuff like that. So anyway, here, let's get back to where we were. So she works at the mall in Babbage's. She works at the store at Babbage's at the mall. I'm sorry, at Crossgates Mall. Everything seems to be apparently normal as she's a college student, whatever. So I did want to mention here, little is known about, I'm just going to make a little space here. It's very difficult to find out any real solid information about this guy, Richard Condon. Apparently he does have like a LinkedIn page where he's got some good recommendations about his computer business, whatever or wherever that is. So she continued her relationship with Richard. So let's just establish that around this time. According to her sister and some other individuals, she was also very, let's see here. According to her sister and some other people, she was also struggling in her classes towards the beginning of the new year and into March, shortly before she disappeared. Her sister mentioned in a podcast or an interview or something that she was just kind of becoming disillusioned with college, as most of us do, unfortunately. SUNY Albany was becoming very difficult, and computer science, that's a really tough major. So she was probably really stressed out. In addition to that, she was working 2 jobs, trying to juggle a boyfriend and a family on top of it. So her mother, Mary, stated around the Christmas of 1997, just before the new year, that Susie did not seem like herself, saying she was distant and was wearing baggy clothes and did not want her picture taken, which was unusual for Susie. Susie was always wanting her picture taken. Let me see if I can pull up another one here. Just an extremely beautiful, photogenic person. So I think that's a little weird when somebody is, and usually she's smiling even more than this. Like she just has this light about her that just, makes you interested in her and just kind of makes you feel good. Would have been a pleasure to know this person, Susie, I would imagine. So let's follow the story here. So she returned to campus. Well, let's see here. I think we got off track here. Okay, so yeah, after Christmas or whatever, she returned back to campus to continue her semester after the new year. As normal, on March 2nd, she rode the bus to the Crossgates Mall for her shift that began around 4 p.m. at Babbage's, the computer and video game store. Earlier that day, or sometime before her shift, Susie did make an ATM withdrawal, $20, maybe just to buy dinner or something, it's alleged. Not sure if it was, I think it was at the campus before she actually arrived at the Crossgates Mall, but I could be wrong about that. So let's see here. Okay, so she worked until about 9:30 or so. Her boss sort of checked in with her during that day, asked her how her exams went. She was taking midterms. She was kind of stressed out about her midterms. So Susie said that the midterms went okay. So no alarm bells there, just kind of a stressed out college student. So let's see here. She gets off of her shift around 9:30 or so, where she leaves Babbage's and she walks outside to the employee parking lot. For some reason, I wrote parking garage, but parking garage, parking lot, where the bus stop was either in the parking lot or somewhere, beyond that, maybe less than a mile or a couple of meters. Let's see here. The bus driver, so she gets on the bus, right? She's heading back to SUNY Albany campus. The bus driver claims he saw Susie enter the bus, but for some odd reason does not remember her ever getting off at Collins Circle where the student dorms were. Now, I find that very odd. Why would you remember somebody getting on? I mean, now bus drivers, I don't know what it's like to be a bus driver. Maybe there's so many people coming and going. Maybe I would forget. But for some reason, this bus driver does not remember Susie ever getting off the bus, which is kind of odd because after the investigation begun when Susie was missing, a student, I'm assuming either a friend or somebody she knew in passing, saw her get off the bus and start to walk towards the dorm. So that's kind of odd. I just kind of put this in here. Whatever happened after Susie's shift, after she exited the bus at Collins Circle to return to her dorm, remains a mystery. So make a long story short, Richard Condon, Susie's boyfriend, was at home playing video games. That was his alibi after this sort of investigation started, and noticed that he was unable to reach his girlfriend either by phone, email, or instant message. This was a personal question I had that some other people also have. Why did he never drive down to the dorm at SUNY Albany to make sure where she was or to try to follow up on her, you know, not contacting him, right? So the day of March 2nd ended, and now we're into March 3rd. And I believe that this is the morning where Richard Condon called Mary and Doug Lyle to report or sort of announced. It's sort of debated how he actually brought this up in conversation, but I'm assuming he called her parents and said, "Hey, have you guys heard from Susie? I can't get a hold of her." I've actually heard from Mary Lyle's interviews that he said something to the fact of, "Did you know Susie was missing?" So that's maybe a little odd. How did he know she was missing, other than the fact that he just couldn't get a hold of her? But Richard Condon and his family were the first ones, I believe, to contact campus security and reported Suzanne Lyle's disappearance, or tardiness rather. So let's see here. Anyway, so supposedly Richard Condon was at home playing video games, right? Um, the next morning after he was allegedly at home playing video games, he did call her parents. We just discussed that. Okay, so this is the second strange part of the Suzanne Lyle case. The first day after Susie was missing on March 3rd, I guess March 3rd starts her official missing date, even though the evening after work, technically that might be the first day she goes missing. But anyway, on March 3rd, a strange occurrence happened at a small convenience store named Stewart's, located about a mile or so from campus. Susie's ATM card was used, and the PIN number was a direct hit, which means it either had to be Susie or whoever kidnapped Susie, coerced this PIN number out of her. And they apparently, whoever it was, they withdrew $20, which is kind of weird too, because it was similar to Suzanne Lyle's usual habit of withdrawing $20. Now, it is unknown like I said, if this transaction was made by Susie or someone else. Now, I did also want to mention that shortly before Suzanne Lyle's disappearance, one of her co-workers eerily mentioned to a police officer that Susie thought she was being stalked by someone she did not know. But according to this friend or coworker, she did not seem to be all that concerned about it. So that's pretty weird. Who was that strange figure? We will never know, unfortunately. Let's see here. We mentioned the stalker, the potential stalker. The second, so basically the investigation gets undergoing, the campus security sort of did kind of a botched job at first, and the investigation was later overhauled by the Albany State Police, as it should have been from the beginning. But back then, they didn't have a lot of campus safety laws. They didn't have a lot of missing persons alerts and stuff like that. So that did hamper the initial efforts of Suzanne and Doug Lyle, as well as the Condons. The Condons were, I will mention, Richard Condon did cooperate and did a few extensive interviews with the police originally. We'll get into what took place and transpired later on. Doug and Mary Lyle were searching the campus, for months and months, working with police, working with investigators. So, make a long story short, for some reason, after the snow melted in May, I think this is according to Wikipedia and also a couple other sites, sometime in the month of May, Susie's Babbage's name badge was found in the visitors' parking lot, I believe, on the other side, opposite where she would have walked to her dorm room. So, Susie Lyle's Babbage's name badge was found on or near campus, near the dorm rooms. Originally, I thought that the name badge was found at the mall, but I'm pretty sure that the name badge was found near campus. I could be wrong about that. Don't get upset with me. A lot of information I'm trying to remember here. But the funny thing about Susie's name badge from Babbage's was that it was an old model. According to some people that work there, or maybe a couple of Susie's family members, it was an older model of the name badge. So that's odd, kind of. Talk a little more about that later. Okay, so let's go back to this strange ATM interaction at the convenience store, about a mile or two away from SUNY Albany campus. Police were then able to further investigate the steward's convenience store, where the transaction withdrawal of $20 had been made on March 3rd. Surveillance footage was oddly not placed near the ATM, which is significant because whoever kidnapped or abducted Susie had to have knowledge of this, that they could go in and nonchalantly, use the ATM without being seen. That's very creepy to me. So like I said, the ATM, the surveillance footage was not, the camera, the footage was not pointed at the ATM, but instead above the front counter and cash register where some individuals were identified and interviewed by police. So around this time, they did sort of track down a bunch of people, maybe 3 or 4, maybe 6 to 7 people that sort of walked in and out of the grocery store either that day or sometime during this ATM withdrawal. But there was one suspect that they could not seem to track down, and allegedly he was discovered to be what is known now to be as the Nike Man. He was some black guy that either lived around there or worked on campus that was wearing a Nike hat, and he was I do not believe that he was the one that made, well, obviously nobody knows who made the ATM transaction. Nobody can prove that. It's very difficult to prove because there was no surveillance on the ATM. They screened it for fingerprints and forensics and all that. Nothing was found. It could have possibly been the Nike Man. But the funny thing is that the Nike Man in the footage at the ATM, according to, or not the footage at the ATM, but the surveillance footage that was captured of this mysterious Nike Man at the desk, at the cash register, he was carrying dollar bills. So it's not alleged that he withdrew $20. It looks like he just maybe had $5 or $10 bills in his wallet, but that was never really proven either. But if he was the one that used the ATM, why was he not holding a $20 bill? Is it possible that you could program how you wanted your money to be exchanged? Like maybe he wanted 21s. I don't think you can really do that. I don't think you could do that back then at an ATM, but it's possible. Or maybe he stuck the $20 in his pocket and just pulled out, some extra cash he had in addition to that. Anyway, so we did discuss the Nike Man. I'll show you guys a picture of him right here. It's a little small. See if we can get this on the screen here. So that is the Nike Man. It's very blurry, but his apparently Richard Condon and his family paid for a huge bulletin in Albany or somewhere near there with this guy's picture on it. This was a couple weeks or a month before they identified him, but he was one of the ones on surveillance. So he was named the Nike Man, and Richard Condon and his family kind of paid for the promotion of this on the big billboard near the city. But anyway, make a long story short, he was kind of ruled out. I just want to make sure my pictures are working here. Hopefully you don't have to, hopefully I wasn't supposed to click the large scale screen for all these pictures. Hopefully you guys can see the pictures and the notes. So let's get a little bit more into this here. The Nike Man was eventually ruled out for whatever reason, but he's not completely ruled out. So he's not a suspect, but he's not completely excluded from the investigation, basically. And I personally don't think it was a Nike Man. I think maybe the Nike Man witnessed something. And there are some, I have read on some forums and some different comments on YouTube that the Nike Man, while he was being interrogated and questioned, mentioned seeing a tall farmer looking guy at the Stewart's gas station, which kind of reminds me of this other guy that will kind of play into the story later on here. So the Nike Man did, oddly enough, have a history of rape, and I'm not sure if he was employed by SUNY Albany campus or not. I've heard some places he was a worker of the university, but that's unclear. So a little sketchy, but apparently they could not, charge him with anything. They didn't have any evidence, but who knows? So now basically that's the sequence of events of Suzanne Lyall's disappearance. Now we're going to briefly discuss the suspects. So obviously Richard Condon is a suspect, her ex-boyfriend, because of him sort of remotely controlling her computer and his sort of irrational, over emotional behavior, convincing Suzanne to stay in the relationship. In addition to a whole slew of things, she met this guy on the internet. So maybe he wasn't showing his true colors. Maybe he was mistreating her in some way, but obviously there's no evidence of that. So I'm not accusing him of that. Um, and obviously Mary Lyle didn't like him, but oddly enough, Suzanne's father, Doug Lyle, did like him quite a bit. So that's kind of interesting. So, okay, so we had Richard Condon, and he was, here's something else I forgot to mention. When this whole thing at the ATM showed up, Richard Condon met with the police, or the police went to meet with him or something. According to Richard Condon, uh, him and Susie were the only ones that knew her PIN number. So if he was guilty, why would he say that? Unless he was foolish, or maybe he was, caught in the moment or something. But that's odd. So maybe he was trying to suggest that it was impossible for it to be for him to be responsible for her disappearance because he wasn't there. He was at home playing video games, right? And somehow somebody got access to her PIN number. So it's possible that whoever coerced or kidnapped Susie Lyle, was ready, easily got her PIN number. I've been robbed at gunpoint, and I don't remember ever giving them my PIN number, but I probably would have if they had asked. I definitely gave them all my cash, all my credit cards. But anyway, so okay, so we've ruled out the Nike man and Richard Condon. Obviously, Richard Condon's a little strange, but there's no evidence, either physical or forensically, or it's all circumstantial as it is with Nike man. Now, there's a couple other individuals that come into play here. This is a more recent development, but serial killer Israel Keys has been sort of linked to Suzanne Lyall's disappearance because of his location at the time during 1998. He worked at some kind of recruitment office or something around the time of 1998, towards the end of 1999. But he was also enlisted in the Army, based in Albany, I think. He went to that particular recruitment center. And also, Israel Keys had a house way out in the country, maybe about 200 or 300 miles from SUNY Albany campus, which is not really that far, in a small town called, what was it called? It's escaping me at the moment. Very small town, past Tupper Lake and all that stuff. Something New York. Constable, New York. So we had a place, a real small place up in Constable, New York, which was not far from SUNY Albany campus. And as well, as far as Israel Keys is concerned, I spelled his name here. It doesn't really matter. The guy was a piece of shit. Let's just spell his name wrong for the sake of it. Israel Keys. So anyway, also there was a spotting of Israel Keys at the same exact mall, the Crossgates Mall, by another woman around the time of 1998, maybe earlier, maybe after. The second time the woman was interviewed, she says it may have been as late as 1999, which sort of makes the whole Israel Keys theory a little bit not provable, but she claims it was around 1998. And this man, tall man with scraggly hair, came up to her and asked, "How old are you?" And eventually, I think she said something to this effect of, "Well, how old do you think I am?" She kind of threw him off guard. And I think he realized that in his sick mind, she was not young enough for what his potential target was or something. So anyway, he walked off. But she did later identify this strange man in the parking lot as Israel Keys. I'm not going to show the faces of any of these perpetrators just for the sake of decency. I will show you guys a picture of Richard Condon, though, because I think that might be relevant. This is Richard Condon with Susie Lyle here. Pretty cute couple, but he was a little bit older than her. Now, this guy, looks can be deceiving. but I don't think this guy could pull off any kind of murder or kidnapping unless he had somebody's help. He was probably just kind of a weirdo. Maybe he was a little controlling, but maybe Susie was too submissive to him too. And I'm not victim blaming on any level there, but I think they were kind of polar opposites on many levels from what I've come to understand. So anyway, we've talked about him. We've talked about the Nike man. We've kind of briefly discussed Israel Keys. And Israel Keys is a real sickening, fascinating character. And what seems to be related, also why he's related to Suzanne Lyall's case, at least circumstantially, is after he was captured sometime in the late 2000s, maybe around 2011 or 12, Suzanne Lyall's name came up on his computer under his search history. So either he was studying the missing persons abduction cases from, around his area that he lived around that time, or he was keeping tabs on his own crimes. So I'm leaning towards Israel Keys on this one. Real, scary, sick, and a total sick in the head type of guy, but he is interesting. He would fly all over the country and bury kits underground out in the middle of nowhere. What he called murder kits, very creepy, so that he would not have to bring anything with him, right? And also, as far as Israel Keys is concerned, there's just too many things about Israel Keys that seem to link him to a lot of these crimes. He abducted a woman in Alaska, Anchorage, Alaska, I believe. Nobody knows exactly how many people he abducted, but anyway, he had the strange habit of he would test their PIN numbers. He would get a hold of somebody's money or their credit card or bank account, and he would test their PIN number. That's not uncommon for somebody who's trying to kidnap somebody. So anyway, as far as Israel Keys is concerned, we'll never really know, because Israel Keys committed suicide supposedly in jail by slitting his wrist and hanging himself. I'm not sure I quite believe that, but I guess it's possible. And anyway, where's the other guy we had in here? I must have forgotten to write it here. Oh, here it is. We also have another potential suspect by the name of John Regan, who committed an attempted abduction of a high school student back in 2005 at Saratoga Springs, which is not far from Albany at all, maybe less than 50 miles, maybe less than 10 miles. And John Regan that's an interesting story. I'm not really going to get into his sick world, but he was eventually captured and hopefully will be remaining behind bars, as we hope. The thing I don't understand about these perpetrators, it seems like you have to do something pretty crazy for them to really lock you up for good. Like some of these stories, like as far as John Regan, he was a prominent traveling salesman / contractor in his hometown. So maybe that had something to do with it. But he was accused of rape and potential murder as far back as 1993. Now, why this guy was even out on bail or out on parole or out on anything is anyone's guess. We can talk about revamping the legal system at a later time. So we have a bunch of sickos here, right? We got the strange Nike man who was a rapist. We got Israel Keys, who was a convicted serial killer. And we have John Regan, who was also a convicted pervert serial killer. And then we have Richard Condon, who's never been in trouble with the law. And I don't really think Richard Condon, it's possible he knows something about his girlfriend's disappearance, but I do not think he's the perpetrator. A lot of people seem to think that he was the one just because he knew the PIN number and he was a little weird. He spied on her. But I don't know. I'm not leaning towards Richard Condon. I'm definitely leaning towards Israel Keys. Not really leaning towards John Regan, but it's possible. But what I do want to discuss before we get into Suzanne Lyall's poem, which was the original focus of this video, we've kind of gone, and I wanted to let you guys know about this case so you guys would be able to put the poem a little bit in context. But on SUNY Albany campus, dating as far back as 1985, there was another missing persons abduction. I forgot the woman's name, unfortunately. I've been reading about so many different cases, but she was exiting a tanning salon near or on SUNY Albany campus and went missing near the bus stop. So that sounds highly suspicious and very similar to Suzanne Lyall's case. So maybe it's the same perpetrator, maybe not. You know, there's so much. That's the strange thing about this case and a lot of other cases, that there's so many potential perpetrators, but there's no leads on them. Well, they've got leads, right? They've got circumstantial evidence and stuff like that, but they don't have any real definitive way of proving that any of these people did it. So it kind of just makes your mind go in circles, which is very unfortunate. So we are going to read the poem by Susie Lyle that we mentioned at the beginning of this video. It's very long. I might not read all of it, but I do want to read some of this to you guys. Because there's something in here, guys, that I wonder if anybody is maybe not looking at. I gotta reduce the screen here because I can't see it. Let's see if I can get this. Okay, we're gonna move this to the bottom of the screen. Make sure we're still recording. Okay, so as I told you guys, Susie Lyle was a poet. She was actually a wonderful poet, a better poet than myself. She wasn't writing novels or anything to my knowledge, but as far as her poetry, very, very profound. Now, hopefully Richard Condon doesn't come after me for reading this. And my intention is not to take this out of context. You know, it's possible she wrote this about somebody else or was inspired by something. So we really don't know, but there's some real interesting kind of creepy material in here. Some of you guys are probably already reading it, but I'm going to read it to you guys. All right, so this is a poem that Susie Lyle wrote. I'm not sure when this was written, sometime in the 90s, I would assume. Elusive was this feeling of stability as it slipped in and out of existence, only gracing its presence for a split second and then leaving as quickly as it came in the scheme of my short life. Weird. So maybe she was saying that her life was short up until the time this poem was written, or maybe there's something, you know, more dark here. Who knows? When the time was right for you, it was not at all for me. When the time was right for me, I wasn't aware of your existence. Now I see life as a fractal of incessant repetitions. Now here's the weird part here, guys. He only did to me what was done to him. I only did to you what was done to me. I only did to you the one thing I tried hardest not to do. Why? Because it was inevitable. I only feared having what happened in the past happen again. My first situation I looked at from one side, one viewpoint, the next I saw from the other. It was as if I was gasping for air and inhaling in a desperate attempt to remain conscious, and with the air in came all the problems contained within my surroundings. So we're going to rewind back here to I only did to you the one thing I tried hardest not to do. He only did to me what was done to him. That's, to me, it's screaming of some type of abuse, either that she's aware of from somebody. I'm not sure who this poem is about, right? So I'm not trying to make you know, complete statements here or anything, or assumptions, but she wrote this poem either about herself or somebody she knew. So, and it seems to allude to some type of either physical abuse, emotional abuse, possible sexual abuse. Who is Suzanne Lyle talking about here in this poem? I don't know. I don't pretend to know, but it is pretty weird. Okay, so we fast forward here. She talks about gasping for air and all this stuff. I had found the one who could reciprocate my love for an equally large amount of pain I could not take anymore. Is she writing about herself? Probably. I began to shut out everyone who wanted to get in. Everyone who wasn't already in no longer had the option of ever getting in. When I used to hear you tell me that you understood, I didn't believe it. It took something horrible to happen, something not in the past nor in the future, but now. You began to repeat everything that I had at one point or another told you in the moment. Through yourself, you relieved virtually every feeling I had dealt with, every feeling that brought me to this point. Every fear that you had once contradicted the logic of was now yours to feel. I find much sadness in the fact that in order to understand another's loss, we must undergo a loss themselves. In order to remember what it feels like, you must relive it. And though time has a healing effect on my wounds, it still leaves me with the scars. So, what is Suzanne Lyle talking about here? I don't know. How can I help you if I can't let you in? How can I let you in if I have no idea where I need my boundaries to be? I often doubt my pain and what it is symbolic of. Your problems seem so much more significant, more intense. And it is. So who is this person she's talking to? I don't know if it's Richard. It may not be. It could be about a friend or something, but or a relative. Your problems, my pain belongs to me. Yours belongs to you. When trying to relive someone's pain, it almost seems that it's carbon copies of itself. The first copy belonging to the person inflicted with it, bright and dark. The second belonging to the person trying to help, a bit paler and faded. And then there is love. Here's another interesting part here, guys. And then there is love. Not all are obliged to love the one who loves them back. And when I read that, guys, I think of, the alleged scenarios of Susie trying to break up with this person. If, as Mary Lyle mentioned, if so, then why does it feel so horrible when you don't love them? I'm assuming. I never intended on having you frustrated, watching as you tried to sink into the depths of my heart and seeing your pain felt in your futile efforts. I couldn't let you in. Off screen here. I couldn't let you in. There was fear instilled within me, fear that compelled me to fight against every effort you made. So that's the poem that I wanted to share with you guys. Very odd, I think. Something very odd about this whole entire case. So in conclusion, guys, as I said, I watch a lot of Dave Paulides and recently kind of latched onto this case because it's from my home state. But just be aware of this kind of stuff, because you never know how you might be able to help a missing persons case or some type of crime. Be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of who you associate with. Um, you know, always tell people where you're going, even if it's, just to walk across the street to grab a coffee or something. Stay in communication with people. Tell your loved ones you love them. Look out for each other. Don't be buried in your phone when you're walking across the parking lot. Just always kind of be on guard. But not only that, um, find something in your life. Find something in your life that's meaningful to you. Susie Lyle, for example, was a great poet. She was a computer nerd. She was a wonderful family member to her siblings and her parents, and obviously an amazing girlfriend to Richard. And he obviously didn't want to lose her. Um, so in conclusion, I kind of made this video because I'm interested in these topics, but also the whole literature thing, the poetry thing. This video will kind of just be a one-off, but I did just kind of want to get you guys thinking about this thing, about this case. Maybe you guys can help, or any missing persons case that you gravitate towards for one reason or another. We get so wrapped up in our own problems, we never really seem to think about other people's problems. But I think something like this is a good place to start. See if I can get my full screen back here. I'm not sure where it went. Where's my full screen? Let's see here. I don't know where my full screen went. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this video, guys. If you guys have any questions about the Suzanne Lyle case, just follow up on the videos I sent. You can look her up on Google. Follow me on Instagram at Andrew Marlowe Artist Official, or send me an email at andrewmarlowe22 andrewmarlowe22@gmail.com. I do have some more awesome book reviews coming up for you guys. Some more motivational literature type stuff. Yeah. So we'll be getting into that very soon. And thank you so much for listening to this video. Take care.